Welcome everyone to our webinar about MT Sobek Adventures in Japan. Thank you so much again for joining us. I'm really excited to talk with you. My name is Sharman. I'm the program director for Japan at Mountain Travel Sobek. And again, I'm just really excited to share this next hour with you and talk about the amazing country of Japan and about our adventures there. So I first visited Japan over 25 years ago. I've been back many times since. And in my experience, once you go, you definitely become hooked. So I know that a lot of folks who sign up for our trips to Japan have been before and fell in love with the country just as I have. You could really spend months just in the big cities like Tokyo and Kyoto. There's so much to see and do. And then once you start venturing into the countryside, also, there's just a huge variety, traditional farming villages, old samurai towns and castles, beautiful gardens. And of course, each place also has amazing local dishes and seasonal foods to try. So really, it's just wonderful to go different times of year, see the transformation of spring flowers, all the shades of green in the summer, and then the fall foliage. And even as winter is creeping in from either side, seeing some of the snow dusting the roofs of the temples is pretty magical. I was most recently in Japan this past May, accompanying one of our groups on the Kyoto to Tokyo walking adventure. And then I also did some scouting work for our new Shikoku and Inland Sea Islands adventure. And that's where this photo was taken, this beautiful red torii gate that looks like it's floating on the sea off of the island of Miyajima. So that is on a place that we visit on our new trip. And then just this little detail here, I thought was kind of fun to include. These beautiful little, this is some artwork that's on the wall of one of our hotels on the Shikoku Island trip, and just kind of shows you this lovely Japanese aesthetic that's in all the little details, and you experience that everywhere you go in Japan. So just wanted to include that here. So what will we cover in this hour? First, I want to talk a little bit about where Japan is and what makes it so special, kind of get into the big picture. Then I'll get into some of the details about what sets our Mountain Travel Sobek trips apart in Japan, the special MT Sobek sauce. And that will include some introductions of our guide team and also some helpful information about the way our groups travel in Japan. So really carefully chosen accommodations, meals, and the ways that we move between locations. And all of that helps us provide you with authentic cultural immersion that is really a core part of our experience in Japan. Then I will delve into each of the 4 scheduled group itineraries that we have, Kyoto to Tokyo, the Kumano Kodo, Northern Honshu, and then our new Shikoku Pilgrimage and Inland Sea Islands. And then at the end, we will definitely leave some time for questions. And speaking of which, if you do have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat box. And my colleagues are managing that and will get those over to me, and I'll try to field those. But if there's anything that we don't get to during the call, we'll be sure to follow up with you afterwards. Okay, so let's get started. Where is Japan? Probably most of you know, but it's this amazing archipelago of islands. There are 4 main islands. It's right off of the coast of the Asian continent. And so it goes from north to south. You have the Hokkaido Island, the main big island here of Honshu. The Shikoku Island that I've mentioned, where we have our new trip here, is the smallest of the 4 main islands, and then Kyushu Island. So those are the 4 big ones. But actually, there's over 14,000 islands in Japan. And it's located on the Ring of Fire, which surrounds the Pacific. And so as such, there are volcanoes throughout the archipelago, and that also that creates some of the beautiful mountains that you see, and also the lovely hot spring baths that are a really wonderful component of our trips to Japan. Our MT Sobek trips mainly focus on this largest island of Honshu, various parts of the island. And I'll show you exactly where each trip goes. We also do now go to Shikoku, but this just gives you a general context. And even though Japan is relatively small in terms of land area, it's 146,000 square miles, give or take. So it's about the same size as Germany. It's a little smaller than California, a little bigger than the UK. But it does stretch really far from north to south. And so that gives you a lot of different climate zones and landscapes, just a lot of variety, even in such a small land area, mainly because of how far it stretches north-south. A few other facts about Japan. I talked already about the 4 main islands, but also just the cuisine of Japan is one of the world's great cuisines, very distinctive. Lots of rice, fish, and vegetables, relatively little fat. It's a wonderfully nutritious diet, and that has led to Japan having one of the world's longest living populations. So this is something that is pretty exciting for most travelers to get to try, and you really can't have this level of Japanese food outside of Japan. You'll find it to be quite different from what you might have had at restaurants in North America. And then also just the heritage of Japan with coexisting Buddhism and Shintoism, it really is ingrained in a lot of what you see and do in Japan. And it's a very special blend of the two, and a real emphasis from the Shinto side of it on the natural world and really appreciating nature and attributing mountains, trees, and other elements as having their own spirit or kami. So that is something really integral. And then key for us who love to hike, there is a lot of mountains in Japan. About 80% of the landmass is covered by mountains, including 60 active volcanoes and lots of hot springs, like I said. So let's keep moving forward. So I just want to explain a bit why you should consider coming with us with Mountain Travel Sobek. We do have unrivaled expertise with hiking and walking itineraries, and that is a key element of all of our trips. All of these are hiking and walking trips. And our experience with those means that we really consider all the details that make that a success. And I'll get into some of those as in the following slides. But then also, as I already mentioned, authentic cultural immersion is really important for us with these trips. And we get a lot of great feedback from our guests about how well this translated for them to make it a really memorable experience. So you really do get to experience Japan up close and personal, both in terms of the lodgings, the meals, and then the transportation also plays a big part in that. So I'll get into that as well. And of course, like everywhere that MT Sobek travels, we only have small groups, so always fewer than actually fewer than 14 for Japan, sometimes fewer than 12. Most of the groups are around 10, 8 to 10 guests. So, and then each group is always led by an expert local guide, a Japanese guide. Here are some of our wonderful guides in Japan. We get wonderful evaluations. These people are the ones who make the huge difference in our experience. A lot of them have lived outside of Japan, and so they have some good perspective, both from having lived outside of Japan and coming from that country. So they are really, really gifted at helping others appreciate the culture and history and traditions of Japan. And also super organized, which is important because the logistics can be complicated for the trips, the way that we are moving from spot to spot, and they just do a beautiful job managing all those logistics so it's seamless. You will be amazed at how smoothly it all works. And these are just an incredible team. So some of the ones here, this is Tomomi here on the left, and then Chihiro, Toshi, and then Hana up there on the upper right, and Jun. So these are some of the guides that we have on many of our departures, and there are others as well. We do always have a guide to guest ratio of 1 guide for every 8 guests. So if there's 9 or more, you'll have 2 guides. sometimes, so it's always one lead guide throughout, and then you'll either have an assistant guide that is with you the whole time, or sometimes we'll break it up and you'll have a few different assistant guides over the course of the trip, but you always have the one central lead guide throughout, and both ways it works great. The next slide. One of the other ways, and this is true across all of our trips, we always have a blend of Western style hotels and traditional Japanese lodging so that you really get to have that true cultural experience. So when I say traditional Japanese lodgings, what I mean, it could be one of three different types. There are ryokans, minchikus, and shikubos. You probably have heard of ryokans before. Those are the traditional Japanese inns. And then minchikus and shikubos I will explain a little bit further in the next slide. And then another aspect that you'll experience at all these traditional Japanese accommodations are some sort of communal baths. So either a furo, which is just filled with hot tap water, but it's kept nice and hot for guests to enjoy, or actual hot spring onsen baths. So those are definitely a highlight. So talking a little bit more about the traditional lodgings. Most commonly, you would be sleeping on a futon, which are these mats that can be rolled out onto the tatami floor. So these are the rice mat floors that are called tatami. And then you have the futon bed that's rolled out, and then a pillow that is usually a buckwheat pillow. So it's got these kind of buckwheat seeds. It's kind of like a bean bag. So a little unusual when you first experience it, but it's actually quite comfortable, and it's something really wonderful to experience this kind of accommodation. When you first walk into a room in traditional lodgings, you won't necessarily see the futon already laid out. Usually it's laid out while you're at dinner, and the room looks fairly sparse and empty, but it's beautiful, with rice paper screens or windows, these lovely tatami mats that are immaculately clean, usually some low seating and some hot water and tea laid out for you to enjoy a little snack when you first arrive. But the different types again, so the ryokans are the traditional inns. They can be in modern buildings or traditional wooden buildings, but the rooms themselves always have this beautiful aesthetic. And then the minchikus, which we use for several nights of each trip, are small family-run inns. They're a little less formal than the ryokans. They also focus on amazing meals featuring local ingredients. In those, you're more likely to have the staff actually, instead of rolling the futon out for you, sometimes you're going to lay it out yourself. It's stored in the closet there. And so one little tip about that is when you get to lay it out yourself, it's actually kind of nice because usually there's extra futon in the closet. You can actually give yourself an extra futon if you want to have a little more cushion. And then the shikubos are temple lodgings. So two of our trips experience this temple lodgings where you have the chance to attend an early morning religious service potentially. And at those are the simplest of all. And usually the bathrooms are down the hall in that case versus private ensuite bathrooms. So a little bit about etiquette and sleeping in these traditional lodgings. Many of you may already be familiar, but just in case, you see these slippers here. Every time that you go inside a traditional inn, you will remove your shoes and put on the slippers that they provide. You use those slippers for walking around the property in the public areas and then just in the entryway to your room. Whenever you come to any tatami mat, whether it's in your room or in the dining area, you would remove those slippers. You only ever walk on tatami with bare feet or socks. And then another important thing about slippers is in the toilet rooms, which are usually their own separate little room inside in your room or down the hall. there's always separate toilet slippers for hygienic reasons that you would change into and wear only in those areas. And your guides will remind you of all of this. There's no need to memorize it all now, but just to mention a few things. Also, I have this picture of kind of a different bathroom style than you might be used to at home, which is showing you the traditional way that bathtubs are used in Japan, which is for soaking only, not for actually soaping up and bathing and cleaning. And so that's why there's a shower head and a tiled area here where you can shower off, do all of your soaping and washing your hair, rinse off, and then you use the bathtub just for soaking and relaxing. So that's not everywhere. You know, some of the Western style hotels, they will have the shower head over the bathtub, like we would here in the US. I also have included this picture of one of our guests wearing a yukata, which are these cotton robes. And at every traditional inn that you go to, they will provide these yukatas for you to borrow. And they also provide the sash, the obi that you tie around your waist. And that's just a wonderful thing because it means that all you need to travel with are your hiking clothes. When you're staying at these traditional inns, there's no need to change into other clothes in the evenings. You've just got your hiking clothes that you wear during the day. And as soon as you get to the ryokan or the minchiku in the mid-afternoon, you can change into the yukata and go and experience the communal baths. And then wear that yukata to dinner as well. So, and even for sleeping at night. So helps you to travel light, which really is a delight. I've mentioned a couple of times about the Japanese baths and soaking in the hot springs. This is a really fun part of any experience to Japan, and you'll have multiple chances to do this. It may not be to everyone's comfort level because you do need to bathe nude in Japan. It's not permitted to wear a bathing suit. And that's to keep the water clean. There's definitely a big emphasis, obviously, since these are communal, to keep the water super clean. And so in doing that, when you first enter, you'll see the bathing areas are designated by these kinds of curtains, blue for men and red for women. There's a changing area where there's baskets that you can store your yukata and your underclothes that you've worn underneath. And so you take all of your clothes off here in this area and store it. And in your room, you'll always have a small little towel, kind of in between the size of a washcloth and a hand towel, that you can carry with you into the bathing area. You don't bring it into the water with you. You would set it on the side, but you do have that. And so you walk in and you choose one of these stations that has a stool, and you can sit on the stool. There's a little bamboo bucket, a shower head, and they always provide shampoo, conditioner, and body wash. So that is everywhere you go in Japan, you will find shampoo, conditioner, and body wash. You don't need to bring that with you on the trip anywhere. And they always provide also a hairbrush, and toothbrush, just a little traveling one, disposable ones. And you would wash off completely, rinse off all the soap before entering into these lovely hot baths. And it just feels amazing after a day of hiking to do this. And it's a great way to participate in an important cultural activity. So some of the communal baths are indoor like this one, and some of them are outdoor. So there's a mix. I also want to talk about food and meals in Japan. If you're an adventurous foodie, you are going to love Japan. There's going to be lots of chances to try things you've never had before. And what we offer our guests is real Japanese food. So these are simple, clean, immaculately prepared dishes. There's an emphasis on eating seasonally. So the flavors are amazing because these are locally grown vegetables and fish that are caught really nearby. So everything has an incredible flavor and is presented beautifully, as you see here. Lunches and dinners on our trips are usually Japanese cuisine. There's a few meals that will be Western style, just for variety's sake, but just one or two here and there. And then I should also mention that when you're staying in the traditional lodgings, you would usually have a Japanese breakfast, which is a set menu breakfast, not a buffet, and usually consists of things. I think it's lovely. I love the Japanese breakfast. It's a savory broth to start with, which really is a great way to start your morning, actually, and then usually a small piece of grilled fish. Always some steamed rice, or you can do a rice porridge at some places. Maybe a small piece of Japanese omelet, tamago, if you've been to a sushi restaurant and had tamago. So there might be a little piece with some grated daikon, and then often a little egg custard dish that's served warm, and some small plates of pickled vegetables. So that would be sort of a traditional Japanese breakfast. It's really delicious. It's not traditional to provide coffee in the morning at the inns, but more and more it is being offered. So we did find that at most of them we could get some coffee, but our guides also do a good job to bring some disposable, what do you call it? Not disposable, instant coffee packets. There's always hot water available. So if there's things that you would like to have with you, if you're a little worried about the Japanese breakfast, for example, you could bring some dried oatmeal packets, knowing that there's always hot water for you to mix that up. So, yeah, just the idea. And then coffee as well. Our guides try to provide some coffee packets for those who can't get their day started without a cup of joe. And then when we're at the Western hotels on the trip, there would usually be buffet breakfasts, and those would have a mix of both Western foods and Japanese dishes so that you can try whatever works best for you. One thing from this picture I just want to point out, you can see that the guests are sitting a little bit closer to the floor than you might be used to. So most of the meals you'll be on sort of low chairs with lowish tables. Only a couple of times on each trip might you be fully on the floor, sitting on a cushion, Japanese style. That's mainly at the Shukubo, the temple lodgings, and maybe one other instance or so. But for the most part, it's relatively comfortable with a chair back and sort of half height. I'm going to keep moving forward. Here's some images of food in Japan. So again, you'll pretty much have rice or noodles with every meal. That is, in Japan, they don't really consider it a meal unless you have one or the other, as well as miso soup. So that's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then almost always some pickled vegetables of some sort. Usually some tofu dishes, just in small amounts, but everything is just beautifully presented. And a lot of emphasis on seafood, definitely not always raw fish. So there's often some grilled fish, and when it is raw fish, it's a little piece. It's usually in its own little dish. It's called sashimi, and impeccably fresh, great, very mild flavored, actually. So definitely worth trying. And a lot of wonderful soups. There are also meal styles where you cook your own meat and vegetables in hot broth. So like at shabu shabu, this is a shabu shabu dinner that the group is having. So really just a wonderful variety of food that is offered. Let's see. I want to talk a little bit about how we get around in Japan on our MT Sobek trips, which I think is pretty unique. Most other companies will use a private bus, and we've seen over and over in the evaluations that our guests really appreciate that we don't isolate ourselves into a private bus, but instead we're right in the middle of everything. And this is also the most efficient way of getting around Japan, is to use their incredible network of high-speed bullet trains, local trains, subways, buses, and it's just super fun. And so at the start of the trip, you'll get something like this transportation card that you wear around a lanyard around your neck. And that will, for example, on the Kyoto to Tokyo walking trip, we use it within Kyoto to get around using the trains, subways, buses. And then we also use it on some of the local train rides. For things like bullet trains, your guide will usually have actual tickets that they'll hand out right when you're at the station for each of those journeys. But it's fun, and the guides take care of all the details and make sure that you are where you need to be when you need to be there. Um, and then occasionally, when we're in the more remote areas, we do use a private van or taxi just for short distances, where there's not an efficient way of using the train or bus. So there are a few instances where there's like a hotel van that we use just to get from a station to the hotel, something like that. Luggage. We definitely encourage folks to travel light in Japan. It's very easy and possible to do, and it's the way the Japanese also travel is pretty light. That said, you're welcome to bring just a regular size suitcase with you on your trip. Um, I found that we give guidelines in our trip planners about the exact size and everything, and it shouldn't be restrictive, I don't think, for most people, the size. But that main suitcase will get sent ahead in many instances, and you'll travel with just a little bit of luggage when that larger suitcase is sent ahead. So this courier service is called Takubin. It's a pretty magical system that they have in Japan to send luggage ahead relatively cheaply. So even when you're apart from the group, if you arrive in Japan early or staying after, I encourage you to take advantage of this service in Japan. It really takes a lot of the headache out of travel and feels brilliant to just send the big suitcase ahead and you just keep what you need for the next night or two in your backpack. And if your backpack's not quite big enough or you like to be able to separate it out, you can also have just a very small little duffel or a zipper tote bag that's got your change of clothes for the next day. Something really light that you're not going to mind carrying as you walk through train stations and get from one mode of transportation to another. Sometimes there's a short walk from the station to the hotel. On certain days, you'll have as many as 5 different modes of transportation. So just do keep that in mind. You want to keep it light when you're without your large suitcase. And the Takubin service is usually an overnight service. Sometimes it will take 2 days to get to the next destination. So usually you're without your main suitcase for the at most 2 nights at a time. In some cases, 3 nights on our Northern Honshu trip. And again, just to say that all the inns provide the cotton yukata gowns and slippers, so you really don't need anything to change into in the evening. That's it about the luggage. And just a quick note about traveling on your own by train in Japan, because many folks do arrive early or stay late, which we really encourage. There's so much to see and do. And think it's a great idea. And the vast majority of our guests do either arrive early or stay late or both. And if you do that, you'll probably travel on the train somewhat by yourself. There's plenty of room up overhead above the seats for suitcases, but you do keep in mind you're going to need to be able to lift it up over your head into those compartments. You can also store it at your feet. Some people do, but it will give you very little leg room. And the one other tip is you can pay extra when you're booking your own train tickets to book the last seats in the car. And behind those last seats, there is some floor space for luggage. And only the people who reserve those last seats in the car can use that space. So if you are worried, if you don't want to have to lift your suitcase overhead, this is when you're traveling back on your own. We don't ever travel with our suitcases on the bullet trains with the group. We send it ahead. But if you're doing it on your own, that's just a tip. Let me keep moving ahead. And a few last kind of fun things about Japan. You'll see vending machines everywhere, which is brilliant. There's all kinds of beverages available, both hot and cold, from the vending machines, as well as snacks, sometimes soup, sometimes food items. So that's something really convenient and fun about traveling around in Japan. You'll want to have some coins, for the most part, to be able to use those. And then also at all of the stations, there are little shops selling bento lunches that you can take with you. This is something fun also when you're traveling on your own, is to take advantage of these delicious bento. They're really inexpensive ways to eat and some great food, really well prepared. And then just also some kind of fun images. A lot of people marvel at the high-tech toilets in Japan and the control panels for those toilets, with also, heated seats, a bidet function. So it's fun to get to know how to use those, and you'll get spoiled. And when you come back home, you'll miss it. Okay, so I'm excited to now talk about our specific trips, MT Sobek's trips to Japan. And there are 4 itineraries that we have, scheduled group departures. And I do want to also mention that private and custom trips are also available. So we can do private departures of any of those 4 itineraries, as long as you contact us far enough in advance. So it's very important for Japan that you do book ahead. It's a super popular destination. It's not just a question of getting the hotel space, but also the guides. So the availability of guides is very limited. So typically we're not able to confirm private or custom departures that are super close in, but we're happy to look into it for you. And again, custom itineraries are available if you have something else in mind. We can do both hiking focused itineraries or cultural itineraries, or a mix of both. So that's Lou and Steph, my colleagues, handle those custom trips, and they do a wonderful job and are super knowledgeable about Japan as well. Okay, I'm going to go into the 4 trips. Sorry, this is such an ugly, primitive looking thing, but it was the best I could do to kind of show you the routes that we take and what sets the different itineraries apart that we have, our 4 different scheduled group tours. So this blue line here shows you where we go on our Kyoto to Tokyo walking trip. This is a great introduction to Japan. A lot of people, this is one of our most popular adventures. And it's great for people who've been to Japan before and also people who've never been before. So it's a really nice variety. You go to both Kyoto and Tokyo at either end. You also go to the ancient capital of Nara and the pilgrimage site here on the Kii Peninsula of Koyasan, and then to the Nakasendo route between the post towns here in the mountains in the Kiso Valley. So that is our Kyoto to Tokyo trip right there. And then our Kumano Kodo trip here is shown with the purple line. You can see this trip is really focused in on one small area of Japan. You meet in Osaka, which is here on the coast, and then head straight after that initial night, you head straight into the Kii Peninsula and walk this section of the Kumano Kodo, which is a beautiful, beautiful remote area with forested. It feels miles and miles away from Kyoto and Tokyo, just very pristine forests and mountain temples and shrines. And then you end the trip in Kyoto. And then our Northern Honshu trip, you can see, goes from Tokyo almost all the way to the northern tip of Honshu Island, almost to the town of Aomori that's on the coast. And we make several stops along the way for hiking and walking in the mountains and lakes in this area. So this has got a lot of rural Japan that you'll see on that trip. And then our newest itinerary is shown by this green line here. Starts in Kyoto, and then we head to Shikoku Island, and we do the Shikoku Pilgrimage several days along that route, and also go to the Iya Valley, which is just a beautiful, lush, remote valley. And then we end by visiting 2 islands in the inland sea. This is the inland sea between Shikoku and Honshu Island here. And we visit Naoshima Island and Miyajima before taking the bullet train from Hiroshima back to Osaka. So that's just in a nutshell where the 4 different trips go. And this slide just a quick overview of the different lengths of each trip. So they're anywhere from 8 days to 13 days. The shortest one is our Kumano Kodo, and the longest one is the Northern Honshu trip at 13 days. And then I've ordered them from left to right in terms of the challenge level of the hiking and walking. So this might be helpful for some guests as a guide to choosing which trip is the best fit for you. The easiest walking, I would say, is on the Kyoto to Tokyo trip. The first 3 trips here are all rated level 3 on our website. There is some variation, for any MT Sobek trip. Not every level 3 trip is exactly the same, but we try to group things together. And I would say that the Kyoto to Tokyo is an easier level 3 trip, on the easier side. Kumano Kodo is more challenging, as is the Northern Honshu trip. And then the Shikoku trip, we've labeled it a level 4, but it's on the easy side of a level 4. And I will get into what makes each of these slightly different in terms of the challenge as I talk about each trip in more detail. And then I just quickly summarized the mix of accommodations on each trip, in case that's a factor for people. But all of them do, again, have a mix of Western hotels and traditional Japanese lodgings. Sometimes it's half and half, like Kyoto to Tokyo. It's 5 nights Western hotels, 5 nights traditional lodgings, and sometimes it is a lot more weighted on the side of traditional lodgings, like the Northern Honshu trip, which just has 4 nights at Western hotels, which is all in Tokyo, 2 nights at the beginning, 2 nights in the end in Tokyo, and then in between, it's 8 nights of traditional Japanese lodgings. Move forward. I talked a little bit about the different challenge level of our hikes in Japan, but I just want to kind of give a little bit of an overview. You will find some rustic trails on all of the itineraries, so you will find some uneven terrain at times. So it might be some rocks or tree roots. There may be some stone or wooden steps, and those are often uneven. So there could be some relatively deep steps. And then there's some short sections that are paved or very easy, well-maintained dirt trails. So a mix. There are some steep ascents and descents, sometimes just short flights of stairs, sometimes some really long continuous ascents and descents. So those are the ones where it's more the tougher level 3 or the easier level 4, where we have the significantly longer continuous ascents. And then one thing just to know about Japan, we're never really at high elevation. Most of the trips are actually between 500 and 3,500 feet above sea level, so it's really not a factor. Just the Northern Honshu itinerary does reach elevations up to about 6,500 feet when you reach the summit. That's mainly at Duasanzan on that trip, but really not that much of a factor. And then just what I would emphasize too is you're looking at our website and looking at the activity summary. It's not just the hiking that contributes to the activity level. These are really full active days, whether you're hiking or not. So even though the hikes are not all that long compared to some of our trips, so anything from 3 to 6 hours per day, and I'll get into detail with each trip, but you're also actually on your feet for much of each day because of the different modes of public transportation, getting between trains and buses. And also doing cultural walking tours. So you actually cover quite a bit of miles in Kyoto and Tokyo, for example. Okay, I'm delving now into the first of our 4 trips, and I'll move through these fairly quickly to make sure we have time for questions at the end. But feel free to go back through these slides and the recording and pause on things if you want to read more, check out the images. This one, again, is our Kyoto to Tokyo walking trip. It's 11 days. It's offered in the spring and fall, and is mainly Honshu Island here. So we start off in Kyoto, and then we head to Koyasan here, which is on this peninsula, for 1 night, and then to Nara for 1 night. And then we arrive at the Kiso Valley here, in between Kyoto and Tokyo. So there used to be a historic route, the Nakasendo, that connected the two. And the Kiso Valley is also shown up here. And that is the most beautiful, best preserved section of the Nakasendo today. It includes 11 of the 69 post towns. I will move forward to show you. But let me backtrack and say a little bit about what you do in Kyoto on this trip. And I do want to say that a lot of our itineraries do go to Kyoto. 3 of the 4 go to Kyoto, and on each of them we do different touring. There's so many temples and gardens that you can see in Kyoto. It's just a treasure trove. And so there's plenty that we can mix it up, and such that if you would like to combine more than one of our adventures, you can do so, and there won't be overlap. You actually will see different things. So on this itinerary, we see the Tenryuji Temple, which is a beautiful garden here, landscape garden. We also see the Golden Pavilion here, and which has a beautiful garden as well, landscape garden, and then the Zen rock garden at Ryuanji, which is shown in the lower two pictures here. So a really nice mix. And then the bamboo grove is right next to Tenryuji. So walking through that, it's a really beautiful day in Kyoto. And from there we head to Koyasan. This is a pretty incredible place. It dates from the 9th century, which is kind of staggering. And it's really critical to the Shingon sect of Buddhism, which was founded by the priest Kukai, who's one of the priests that brought Buddhism from India to Japan in the 9th century. So this is just a magical place. You do feel like you're kind of up in the mountains. It's a little cooler, but you're not at any real elevation. And just beautiful old cedar trees. The cemetery, the Okunuin, is really atmospheric. You stay in a shikubo there, the temple lodgings, and wake up early in the morning to do a prayer ceremony, which is what's shown here. And you're watching that. Nothing that you need to actually do, but it's a great experience. And this is just a shot of the cemetery. Also, we spend an afternoon walking through. Then next we head to Nara, which was the capital of Japan briefly before Kyoto. And this is a lot of sites of historic significance that we see. So on the first afternoon, we go to the Kasuga Taisha Shrine and learn a little bit more about Shintoism. And then we also climb up the Mount Wakakusa for some panoramic views. That's a lot of steps. Nobody has to do that part, but yeah, or you can go as far as you want and then turn back and wait for the group at the bottom. But it's a pretty amazing, spectacular view from the top, so fun to do. And then the following morning, we visit this Todaiji temple, which has the huge Daibutsu Buddha statue inside. From Nara, we take the train back to Kyoto and then connect to the Kiso Valley. We take a series of trains to get from Nara to the Kiso Valley, and we do our first afternoon of hiking on the Nakasendo. And the Nakasendo connects these beautiful little post towns called Juku, and it includes, on our route, we stop in Magome, Tsumago, and Narai. These are some of the most beautiful post towns on the route. And you can see pictures of them up here with the traditional wooden architecture, staying throughout at traditional ryokans and minchikus. Here's another picture of the post towns. This is a t-shirt that you can buy there talking about the 69 stations of the Nakasendo. 11 of those stations are in the Kiso Valley, and we visit many of those 11, the most scenic ones. Here's some other pictures that are outside the towns of what the hiking looks like. You meet a lot of both local people and foreigners from all over the world who are walking this Nakasendo route. So it's a really nice experience. A few images of what the hiking is like and the terrain on this Nakasendo and the rest of the trip. There are some stone steps, like I mentioned, usually relatively short flights of stone steps. This one down here that shows longer, that's the hill that I was talking about in Nara, and it's, you don't have to go all the way up if you don't want. Usually for the Nakasendo portion, it's more something like this in terms of length. Again, some rustic trails, some that are more paved like this, or even walking just very short distances on paved roads. And just some images of the group that I traveled with, having a great time, rain or shine. One of the highlights is this day where you go over the Tori Pass. This is one of the longer days, but it's a really gradual climb. It doesn't feel too tough, despite the distance and the elevation gain. It's just over spread out. So, and you get this, hopefully a great view to these snow-capped peaks in the distance. Something really special are all the traditional inns, and at the very last night of the trip, all our groups stay at a minchiku in the town of Narai, the post town, and it's really amazing to be the only ones there after the crowds have gone in the day, and you can just walk on the street at night, all wearing your yukata, and really feel like you're a local. We end the trip in Tokyo. We take the train to Tokyo and have a wonderful day. The highlights of the city, we go to the Imperial Palace and walk through the East Gardens. Sorry, we don't go inside the Imperial Palace, I should clarify, but through the gardens. And then we also visit the Meiji Shrine and see some of the, so this photo of a Shinto wedding is taking place at the Meiji Shrine. And then we see some of the fun urban areas of Tokyo as well, like Harajuku, which is famous for all the teenagers with the great outfits, and Shibuya Crossing down here, one of the busiest crossings in Japan. So it's a nice full day there. We have a farewell dinner, and that's the end of our Kyoto to Tokyo walking trip. I know I'm gotta keep going fast here. So the Kumano Kodo, this is an 8-day trip. Again, it's this little peninsula down here called the Key Peninsula. That's the focus of where we go. And we're walking the Kumano Kodo pilgrimage route. And that actually, there's 3 different portions of it. We are walking the Nakahechi route, which was considered the imperial route. It's still the most popular. And it includes the 3 main grand shrines of Kumano. And those are required if you would like to get the dual pilgrim certificate. So this is one of the, aside from the Camino de Santiago in Spain and Portugal, you can also do that pilgrimage and do this Kumano Kodo and get a dual pilgrim certificate. So that's something unique. And if you'd like to do that, do let us know, because we will ask your guide to get some paperwork for you and help you get the stamps that you need along the way. These are just some, it's just a beautiful, beautiful part of Japan, really far off the beaten track. So some pictures to show you. And there's a lot of history and tradition with this route that you'll learn about. And it's quite a spiritual kind of journey. So I did mention that this is a little tougher than our Kyoto to Tokyo walking. Mainly, you can see some of the steps are really quite uneven with the stone and some high steps there. And there's also some longer continuous ascents that you'll have. So it's a good training for this trip and for the other 2 trips that I'll talk about is to do some stairs and some elevation climbing. So definitely Stairmaster or just doing flights of stairs is really great training for these trips. You'll be glad that you did. And then we end the Kumano Kodo trip in Kyoto. And again, like I said, we have different touring that we do there. We go to this amazing Fushimi Inari Shrine, which has this long corridor of the vermilion torii gates. It's really photogenic. And we also do a tea ceremony in Kyoto, which is something very memorable to do. Our Northern Honshu trip is 13 days. This one is the farthest ranging, covers the most ground. It's also a little tougher than the Kyoto to Tokyo walking trip in terms of the hiking. And this one may go to some places that people haven't heard of. You've probably heard of Tokyo and Nikko, maybe Kamakura, but maybe not do a Sanzan or Mount Hakoda. But these are some beautiful spots, and I'm going to show you in the images what those look like. So again, we start in Tokyo. You'll see some of the highlights. And this, again, we're not overlapping with what you'll have seen on the Kyoto to Tokyo trip. So in this one, you'll do a walking tour in the Yanaka neighborhood, which is one of the few neighborhoods that was not destroyed in World War II. So still preserve some of what Tokyo looked like at that time. And then you'll also go to kind of the heart of Tokyo today, which is Sensoji Temple in Asakusa neighborhood. And the little shopping arcade, the Nakamise Dori, that runs off of that. We also have our welcome dinner in Tokyo, and then head to Nikko and Oku Nikko, the beautiful hinterland of Nikko. This is famous for these intricately painted temples and beautiful forests outside. Then to the sacred peaks of Duasanzan. So these, you'll do some mountain summits, 2 out of the 3 sacred peaks, Haguro-san and Gas-san summits, and you'll spend 2 nights at temple lodgings, a shukubo. From there, you head up to the very north of Honshu Island to visit Mount Hakoda. We take a ropeway up to the top and then hike down. You'll also do a hike up there on this wetlands area called the Kanashi Paradise Line Trail. It's absolutely gorgeous, lots of spring flowers. And then the trip ends with time at the Airasi stream, there's an onsen hotel that we stay at there for 1 night right next to the stream. And you do a hike along this gorgeous place with the waterfalls. And then we actually take a boat cruise across Lake Towada to our last ryokan inn on Lake Towada, so on this lake at the foot of the mountains, before taking bullet train all the way back to Tokyo for the last nights of the trip. This shows a few images of the terrain that you would encounter on this Northern Honshu trip. So again, some pretty rustic trails with tree roots and stone steps. Definitely some elevation gain and loss doing the mountain summits. I included just these quick hiking profile pictures to give you a sense of 3 different days of the hiking. So this is the Gas-san. That's probably the toughest hike of the trip, hiking up to the top and back down. When we're at Mount Hakoda that I mentioned, we take the ropeway up and then hike a ways down. Or in Okuniko, you're kind of up and down quite a bit at the beginning. So just a little sense of the hikes. And our last trip, the new one is Shikoku Pilgrimage. And to show you the route, here's Shikoku Island again. Here's where Kyoto is, where our trip starts. And then this is a little more detail of Shikoku Island. And to show you, again, another view, here's Shikoku, and here's Naoshima Island. After Naoshima, we go to Okayama and take the bullet train to Hiroshima, spend 1 night, and then we end the trip with 2 nights actually on the island of Miyajima, which is pretty special. So this trip, what we see in Kyoto, this is the only one where we actually have a welcome evening with geisha. In Kyoto, they're called geiko rather than geisha, and the apprentice geisha are called maiko. And so we will have both a maiko and a geiko performing and available for photographs at the welcome evening on this trip. And we'll walk the Philosopher's Path from Nenzenji Temple and see the Heian Shrine here and Toji Temple here with its famous pagoda. What is the pilgrimage? Maybe people haven't heard of this Shikoku 88 temple pilgrimage, but it's 88 temples that circumnavigate the island of Shikoku, and it's been around for 1,100 years. We visit 12 of the temples. These are the 12 that we visit, including the first few and the last 2. We've chosen kind of carefully which ones we think are the best hikes and the most representative. Here is showing you just a very busy looking little map, but this highlighted yellow ones, these are the temples that we go to if you want to know exactly where they are in Shikoku, and here's their names. And I just include this slide if you're thinking of doing this trip, it's fun to look at. These are comments from pilgrims who've done the whole route and what it meant to them and the special experience that they had. So I encourage you to go back and read that. These are some images of the temples that you'll see. Most of these are mountaintop temples, so there are climbs that are required to get up to these, and it's a great reward that you have at the top. One of them, you're actually taking a cable car gondola back down. These show you some of the other people doing the pilgrimage, local Japanese people in a group with their priest. And then this was a foreign traveler who was just finishing up the whole pilgrimage that I met. Here's some more images, the beautiful temples at the top. In between this pilgrimage that we do, we spend a couple of nights in the Iya Valley, which is in the interior of Shikoku Island, and it's just a really special place. I fell in love with it when I discovered it about 15 years ago on a trip and have always loved to bring groups here. It's just this incredibly lush valley, beautiful river running through it, and a lot of very traditional villages and architecture, and these fantastic vine bridges. This is one of the villages that we visit, the Ochiai village, that still has these thatch roofed farmhouses. And just some shots of spectacular river valleys. These are the double vine bridges that we visit. There's two, a husband, they're called like the husband and wife bridge. They're both on across the same river, and one is a little upstream from the other. You don't have to cross these, by the way, if you don't want to. You can just stay on one side. But for people who are feeling daring and you want to walk across, you can. It definitely moves as you're going, and there's pretty big gaps between each pane of wood. Let's see. Then we leave Shikoku Island behind and head to the island of Naoshima, which has become pretty famous in recent years. It's a big destination for both Japanese and people visiting Japan for the level of contemporary art and architecture on that island. So most of the architecture has been done by Tadao Ando, and it's just fantastic. He really controls the way that you move through the space and the way that the light comes in and showcases the art in an amazing way. So it's a pretty great place. We visit some of the art house projects, which are old rice warehouses that have been converted into different installations by artists. And then from Naoshima, we head across to Okayama and take the bullet train to Hiroshima and spend a night at the station there before heading the next day for the last 2 nights of the trip to Miyajima Island, which has this iconic shrine and torii gate. We do an amazing hike to the summit of Mount Misen and then take the gondola back down. This is the view that you get from the top. It's absolutely spectacular. You can see the inland sea and all the islands, and you can see also the mountains of both Shikoku and the mainland, Honshu. And just a few images again, similar, this looks probably to some of the other hiking, but just to see some of the stone steps and trickier ascents and descents. And again, to show some of the hiking profile to get a sense, 3 sample days of this trip. So you might have 2 climbs in a day, for example, on day 4. This is a relatively short hike. It's only 3.5 miles. Takes about 3 hours, but you'll feel it because you're constantly either going up or down. And that's the case with most of the hikes on this trip. There's very little flat terrain on this trip, which is partly why we labeled it level 4, even though the distances are not that far. Great. So just in summary, we do get some really wonderful comments from guests for our Japan trips. I've included some of them here. And people really do call out how authentic the experience is, and that they loved the way we mixed in the traditional inns, the food, the local way of transportation, and the fantastic guides that lead throughout. So I meant to leave time for questions. I don't know. Hopefully we can still do that. I'm going to look in the chat over here. Looks like, what questions do we have? A lot of questions. Oh my goodness. Let's see. Differences in the major focus of the different Japan trips. Hopefully we've kind of covered that. I would say, one way to decide is definitely, the difficulty level of the trips. Another way is, I think if you, all of them do work perfectly well as your first time trip to Japan. I would say probably the Northern Honshu trip tends to be taken more by people who have been to Japan before and want to get more off the beaten track. Doesn't include Kyoto, which is something that a lot of people like to do the first time they go to Japan. But it's a really wonderful one for seeing the countryside and getting you, especially if you like to be away from crowds, it's a really good trip. The same with the Kumano Kodo. You're further away from crowds on that trip as well, on that little isolated peninsula. And Shikoku as well, there's definitely not as many tourists who go to Shikoku Island, and many Japanese have never been to Shikoku. It's considered very rural. So let me just keep going. Let's see. Question about skipping a day of hiking. Definitely, you can usually skip a day of hiking, and people do from time to time. I would say if you're going to do that, just connect with a guide in advance. And to get any instructions, usually you can take a taxi or a short train ride, but you'll usually need to be fairly independent when doing that kind of thing. We don't usually have a guide who can go with you to do an alternate activity. So you would be on your own for whatever alternate activity you want to do, but it's usually possible to skip a hike here and there. I don't encourage anyone to sign up for the trip planning not to do any of the hikes. I don't think it would be a fun experience because we don't really have it set up with an alternate activity. But to skip a hike here and there is no big deal. And as long as you're fairly independent and don't mind taking a train on your own or a taxi on your own. Chains or ropes during the hikes? No. No kind of technical difficulty level there. I do recommend bringing poles actually for all 4 trips, just because there is really some uneven terrain like you saw, and with the steps and everything, it makes a big difference to have poles. So even if you don't usually use them, I would encourage everyone to bring them on this trip, and to always bring the rubber caps for the trekking poles is really important. Otherwise, it can be slippery, first of all, with the metal tips on stone or tree roots. And so the rubber caps help with that. And then also you do want to protect some of these surfaces that are historic, the Nakasendo and the Kumano Kodo. Those are really historic paths, and they would like them to not be damaged by metal tips on the poles. Let's see. Private rooms in traditional lodging. And talking about singles. So yeah, I should mention, so for this is said on our website as well and in our trip planners, but for people who've booked single accommodations on the trip, the single rooms are only guaranteed at the Western hotels, not in the traditional inns. For the most part, I would say we are able to provide singles with their own rooms, even in the traditional inns, but from time to time, we do ask guests of the same gender to share. So two females or 2 males sharing a traditional room, both with your individual futon, of course. So that does sometimes happen, and it's usually just for a couple of nights of the trip, not all of the nights in traditional lodgings. And if we can avoid it, we will. Let's see. In terms of, I should mention too, bathrooms, a little bit more about the bathrooms in the traditional lodgings. For the first 3 trips here, there are definitely a couple of nights in each case where there may be shared bathing facilities only. There's not a shower or bath in your actual room in some of the traditional inns. The last trip, the Shikoku Pilgrimage trip, that's not the case. Every single hotel and room does have its own full ensuite bathroom with shower or bath, and the toilet and sink. But for the first 3 trips, there's usually a night or 2 where you would need to do the bathing down the hall. Let's see, I'm just going through the rest of the questions. In terms of footwear, yeah, definitely. The most important thing is good traction. So we recommend mid-weight hiking boots with a really good sole. If you prefer to wear trail shoes, it's mostly okay, if that's something that you're used to hiking in, but be sure that it's got a really stiff sole to support you, and so you don't turn an ankle with some of the uneven terrain. Somebody was asking about having to take shoes off a lot during the day, and that is actually, you don't end up needing to do that all that often. So it's worth having. I had the lace up, full height hiking boots, and I was glad that I had them on the Shikoku trip, for example. And you're really, you're wearing those during the whole hiking, and then by the time you need to take them off, you're taking them off for good for the day. So it's not a lot of on, off, on, off. So I would definitely bring the hiking shoes that work well for you for the hikes and not worry about having to take them on and off. Usually the hiking portion of the day is just a part of the day, and by the time you arrive at the ryokan, you're done hiking for the day and you can take them off and change into slippers. So I think we're almost running out of time. A pilgrim certificate on the Shikoku Pilgrimage. Let's see. No, there is a book that you can purchase. It's not an official like dual pilgrimage that has anything to do with the Santiago de Compostela. But it is an official pilgrimage in Japan, and they do sell all sorts of great gear that you can purchase at any of the temples along the way, including the traditional white coat or the bamboo hat. Or they sell a book also, which I recommend if you're interested. And you can pay extra at each temple to get a calligraphy and stamp from that temple. And it's a really wonderful souvenir of the trip. And if you ever decide to go back to Shikoku and see more of the temples, hike between more of the 88, you could bring that again with you and get more of the stamps. So there is something that you can obtain at the end if you do all 88 temples, but not for the 12 temples that we do. There's not an official certificate. So I would just conclude by saying we would love to welcome you on any of our Japan trips. Maybe many of you are already signed up and looking forward to going. I hope I've answered some of your questions, and if there's more questions that you have, do reach out to us. We love to talk about Japan. We'd love to welcome you on one of our trips. And if you have a question about a private or custom adventure, do let us know as well. I will say one update here on this slide, how long in advance do you need to book? We actually have now sold out the first departure of the Shikoku Pilgrimage. So I wrote there that it was almost sold out. Yesterday we sold the last room. So now that first departure is sold out. We do have space on the second one, and we'll offer it again in 2027 as well. So there will be more chances to do that trip. So hope we can welcome you. Thank you again so much for joining us and taking the time.